Tapu, Assalamu alaikum, Namaste, Haru Nefer. This is Kasank Ma'a Keparu with another video for you. In this video, I want to talk about the greatest secret exposed. But before I do that, I want you to hit the like button on this video. And if this is your first time to my channel, welcome. Hit the subscribe button to get notifications on when I go live or upload recorded videos. Also, you can get the opportunity to read some of my ebooks. They are free and available to you. Just click the link below and you can download them and start reading today. They expand on my teaching and talk about the esoteric. And if you haven't already, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. You can do so for as little as $1 or $20 per month. You can cancel at any time, and you'll get access to exclusive instructional videos. Videos like how to perform a ritual, how to invoke spirits, how to meditate, how to astro project, and all kinds of great things. So consider being a Patreon supporter. Links are in the description box. So I want to talk to you about a very important subject here. It's like of utmost importance that we walk away with a full understanding about what I'm about to play for you, because I'm going to play some recorded clips, and I need you to understand the importance of what you're going to hear today, because it's something that our modern academic scholars are fighting tooth and nail to suppress. They do not want this information out there. They are trying desperately to put in the old way of thinking and to make that the dominant train of thought, whereas we are ushering in new scholars, new individuals who are more importantly asking questions. And these questions, you know, we're living in a dynamic universe. The matrix is dynamic. You ask questions, it gives you answers. So this younger generation, call it the millennials, call it the new age, call it whoever, are now posing questions and getting answers. And these answers do not jive with what the old guard has put in place. And there is a disconnect. And we're seeing now that we have been lied to. And the facade is coming crashing down on them. And it's only a matter of time before we begin to realize what's going on. What is this matrix? Who are we really? Who is really in control? Who are the ruling elite? Who is behind the ruling elite? These questions are going to be answered soon. Now, for many years, I have been preaching, proselytizing, yelling from the pulpit these ideas and theories I put forth. And they're not, I don't want to sound like I am the new Imhotep, or I am Tahuti, Thought, Hermes, Trismegistus, or I am Einstein, or I am Nikola Tesla. What I have put forth in terms of my ideas, which many have seen as revolutionary thinking, some have seen it as crazy. But I think that what I have been saying is only common sense. That if you were to stop listening to rap music and mainstream media and to meditate and go within, you would come out with these same questions and you would propose these same theories. But because our consciousness is caught up in garbage thinking, and that the ruling elite has done as much as possible to dumb down society, that my theories sound advanced, sound far-fetched, when really they're not all that advanced, all that far-fetched. You simply have to divorce yourself from the vibrational frequency of the mainstream so that you can now connect with source, to start thinking from a purer perspective and start asking the right questions. We really get all enthralled by these speakers, these lecturers who go on YouTube and go on a lecture circuit and talk about things, and we go, woo, they're so deep, they're so smart. When you have just as much knowledge as them if you were only to go within and intuit the wisdom and connect with the Akashic records and connect with source, you would be saying the same things. And in fact, when you understand that you are consciousness and that there is only one consciousness, and consciousness has the principle of non-locality, then you realize that these individuals that you pay to go on a lecture circuit to see, that you support and donate on their YouTube channels, are really different perspectives on yourself. So you are communicating with yourself. And yourself is giving you a feedback loop, as we call it. So stop venerating them. Stop putting them on the pedestal. Understand that they are you. Now let's get into the meat of this discussion. For many years, I have been saying this, but very few people have been listening. And I am so elated at this point that now the mainstream media is starting to embrace it. Not because they're embracing it with open arms, because they're forced to embrace it. And I have said that for many years, that the history of the planet and what we've been taught in the major education systems is not right. There's something wrong with it. It's an outright lie. I have said many times that those who belong to the Afro-national movement, Afrocentric movement, are lost and are mental, that they got it wrong. I've said many times that those scholars that they hold up so high, like your Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, had it wrong, but people were not listening to me. Now mainstream media is starting to embrace this. And they're starting to validate what I have said. And what I have said has been threefold. But let's just take it a step at a time. This is the secret that they are fighting tooth and nail to cover up. The first thing that I've said is that Atlantis, ancient Kemet, were not the only advanced civilizations. In fact, we now know that the planet was replete with advanced civilizations, with advanced technology. And when I say advanced civilizations, I'm talking on par with Western civilization. Just as advanced as how we are now. And it is only the Western man, notice how I say that, the Western man's ego, where he props himself up to be the inventor and architect of civilization. That's a lie, because civilization has come way before the inception of Western man, or the idea of a Western man. And that those in the New Age or conspiracy theory arena who hold up in such high regard Atlantis as one of our most high technological civilizations are wrong. You guys have to excuse me, my voice is cutting out. I've been having that problem. That's because I've been under the weather. I haven't been taking my medication because I don't want to take too much Western medication. And every time I do that, it gets me into problems. And the pain starts coming back. And I say, okay, give me that medication again. You now have to understand that the history that we have been told has been covered up and we have been lied to. That history worked in cycles and not in linear progression. I've said this so many times. That those individuals, those Western scholars and historians who've come along and told us that civilization, man, humankind, human, evolved from a primitive state to advanced state is wrong. That's not how so-called Darwinism, evolution works. If anything, it's cyclical. It works in cycles. But what you have to understand is this. If you are a hammer, everything you see is a nail. That you're dealing with very sick historians, Western men, who were racist and sexist and looked at history from their limited left brain, polarized perspective. All it could think was in terms of left brain, linear time space. Now we realize it was all wrong. That there is no past, future, or present in the linear progression of the sense, that there's only one, which is a now moment. So those historians, Western scholars, and yes, I'm talking about those like Darwin and those individuals, were dumb and led us in the wrong direction. So consequently, they told us that civilization has reached the zenith with Western society. We are the most advanced technologically and morally. They're dead liars. They're liars. The evidence has now come to light that history has been peppered with advanced civilizations. But these civilizations, for one reason or another, fell and were covered up in a mass conspiracy. They were covered up so that we would never realize that what we have today in terms of, the technological achievements are nothing in compared to what we had in yesteryear. Atlantis is nothing compared to the other advanced civilizations that were out there. Kemet is just one of many advanced civilizations. But there was a concerted effort to cover this up and to lie to the population on the planet so we would not know our true history. Something happened, a global phenomena which destroyed or took down these civilizations, and then came along the ruling elite which covered up these civilizations. So it would take a tremendous amount of effort to unearth the artifacts and the truth of what was there. And I even took things further. Now that we understand that we live in a matrix which is energetic, it's dynamic, it communicates to you, your very strong beliefs and emotions vibrate into a certain frequency, which then causes a collapse in the space-time continuum and brings about a new reality for you. We know this is true. So if you understand that this is a possibility, and we know this because quantum mechanics tells us, then we know that the ruling elite were able to erase our memory because they implanted a virus, a belief system, which told us that history follows a linear progression. So we believe that when we look back into history, we were looking back into primitive times. But lo and behold, when we look back into history, we are looking at advanced technology. We're looking back into the future. They cannot deny that there are carvings in the tombs of airplanes, spaceships, batteries, light bulbs. How is that possible? Because they lied to us. They lied to us. And those who were the oligarchy were rich, ignorant, stupid, racist white men who controlled academia and were able to control the flow of information on a global scale and lied to us. You are reminiscent or having the ancestry to a lost advanced civilization, but they won't tell you that. Because they always want you to look at history with nostalgia for the past, the good old days, the primitive times, the caveman times, the hunter-gatherer times. That's not how it was. They were more advanced than us morally. They were more advanced than us technologically. Now the question is, what wiped them out and who covered it up? Do you understand what I'm saying? All right, let's get down to it. There is a British scholar and journalist, Graham Hancock. He's one of the ones leading this movement to get this information out there. Now, I don't agree with a lot of things he teaches and he says, but he's on point with some things. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. All right. But we need to start listening to these individuals who are on the fringe, who have a different perspective and take on these things. Because, put it this way, early on when I was studying, I was given Mein Kampf by a friend. He was African American. And I said, why are you giving me Hitler's book? He says, Kasanka, I want you to read Hitler's book. I said, well, why should I read Hitler's book? Because he says, you must know the enemy. You must know their perspective, what they think, how they think. And he was so right. So when you are trying to get to the truth, you have to look even toward people you consider your enemies and try to see things from a different perspective, or try to see things from their perspective. I want to play a clip from an interview with Graham Hancock to talk about this shocking discovery that I've known for many years now is coming to mainstream. I want you to listen in and hear what he has to say.
By an attempted coup d'etat against President Erdogan in Turkey, but is an attempted academic coup happening in Turkey too? Specifically on a mountain ridge in southeastern Anatolia, Göbekli Tepe, an extensive archaeological site said to predate UK's Stonehenge by 6,000 years, maybe the oldest temple on earth and the birthplace of agriculture, architecture and civilization. But why have well-connected elites implied that this highly sophisticated culture appeared fully formed as if by magic straight out of the Stone Age? Joining me now is the author of the international bestseller Magicians of the Gods, Graham Hancock. Graham, thanks for coming on the show. So
now, he is an author, journalist who appears on Gaia. If you don't know what Gaia is, go check it out. They play a lot of New Age stuff. And in his book, Magicians of the Gods, he talks about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which is a site that they have excavated and realized that it has shocking implications. But I'm not going to spoil it. I want you to just listen to what he has to say about it, because it's phenomenal.
Let's begin with this site in Turkey. Why it's so important? The British archaeologist Ian Hodder at Stanford says it changes everything.
It changes everything. We can't look at history the same anymore. We've been spun a narrative for decades, even hundreds of years, about the origins of human civilization. It's supposed to be a slow, steady progress from primitive cavemen and hunter-gatherers through agriculture, through the big building projects to smart old us, sitting here today. And what Göbekli Tepe says is, no, it wasn't like that. There was an earlier episode of high civilization. We have this extraordinary site, a giant megalithic site with pillars weighing more than 20 tons, perfectly aligned to the heaven.
I want to emphasize this point again so that you really understand what I'm talking about. Did you hear where he said that we have been fed a narrative that's been a lie, that civilization began primitive and got to advance? Why was that lie spun? Because you're dealing with scholars who are polarized in left-brain thinking. Left-brain thinking thinks temporally, it thinks spatially, it thinks in terms of space, time, it thinks linearly. They had no choice. In other words, you're not going to be able to solve a problem using the same mindset that created it. You're not going to get solutions from these scholars when they're trapped in only one way of thinking. You're not. Because everything they're going to put forth and postulate is going to have the same flavor. It's going to have the same spin. Linear progression. That's how the left brain thinks. That's how they think. And that's how they're going to see the world. Let's move on and go further.
It contains the world's first perfectly aligned north-south building, which involves astronomy. And as you said in your piece, it's 6 or even 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. Stonehenge has a background. We see it in a settled agricultural community that can create surpluses. Specialists can evolve. But in a place like Göbekli Tepe, the background is entirely hunter-gatherers. And then suddenly we see this huge building project taking place. And in the midst of it, surrounding it, agriculture suddenly appears. And the fantasy that archaeologists are maintaining is that some group of hunter-gatherers just woke up one morning equipped with all these skills to build the largest megalithic site ever seen on Earth, to invent agriculture. I don't think so. I think we're looking at a transfer of technology from the survivors of a lost civilization destroyed in the giant global cataclysm that we know occurred at that time. The survivors of that lost civilization settled at Göbekli Tepe and transferred their skills to the local inhabitants. That's why it pops up out of nowhere with no background.
In fairness to the tale we've been spun, there has been the work of people like Rupert Sheldrake, who said it seems strange that civilizations all around the world happen to start around the same time.
There are many of us working in this field who are troubled by the story of history that we're being given, that we're being fed, that's taught in the schools and universities, and that's relayed by the media. We're concerned about this. It seems to be a story that is designed to convince us that we're the point of it all, that the whole human project has been about us. And I think there's a tremendous arrogance in that, and a failure to learn the lessons of the past. And we should realize now that if we don't learn the lessons of the past, we are actually doomed to repeat them.
Now, you've written about subjects like this before. Göbekli Tepe suddenly sprang to life, as it were. But I mean, is it too early to draw these conclusions, given that only 5% has actually been excavated yet, or will that give more ammunition to you?
To me, the intriguing issue of Göbekli Tepe is that the excavated areas are already bigger than Stonehenge, but we know from ground-penetrating radar that 50 times as much still lies beneath the ground. I suspect that the whole hidden story of humanity is going to be revealed there. Göbekli Tepe is a very mysterious place. It was created 11,600 years ago. It ran for 1,000 years. Then they shut it down. They buried it. They completely covered it, a huge project to cover it. They actually covered it in a man-made hill. That's what Göbekli Tepe means in the Turkish language. It means pot-bellied hill.
Now, the man-made hill he refers to, that is true of many civilizations. One advanced civilization in China, they discovered that there's a buried pyramid there, which was covered up like a pot belly, same thing. So we have to ask the question, who's covering these civilizations up, and why? And the other thing, we'll have to really look into is this global catastrophe of what happened that brought down these advanced civilizations. So the point is, what I'm trying to get to, so that you can understand, is that the main narrative that we have been fed in school, in the universities, about this linear progression and how we develop as humans, and also how Western society via Western man has a very egotistical perspective on things, because he thinks everything culminates with him. That if it were not for his genius inventions, the Industrial Revolution and all of these other things, we would not have this level of technology that we have today. And I put forth that this technology that we have today is being recycled and fed to us in stages. That it's already been invented and already been discovered. We're part of some project where they're slowly introducing this old technology, and we're thinking, oh, smartphones, oh my God, solar panels, wow, we're coming a long way as far as technology is concerned. Is really old technology that they're reintroducing. We're like rats in a laboratory. So let's go on and see what else he has to say.
And then it wasn't seen again for more than 10,000 years. I feel all that effort, all that energy, the high science involved in the construction of the site, we're looking at a time capsule. They're saying, don't forget about us. There is another story that you've forgotten. Remember us. It's important. This is a time of awakening memory.
Okay, you mentioned these preconceptions of putting what human beings at the center of the story. Is that
not
the
only human
problem
beings
with
at the center of the
archaeology?
story? I think the problem is that we put ourselves at the center of the story, by which I mean 21st century technological civilization. We tend to the illusion that the whole story of human progress has been about us, about achieving us. But there may have been much greater things achieved in the past. And perhaps the achievement of human societies isn't only in material terms, but also in spiritual terms. And our society
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. Did he just say that those ancient civilizations were advanced not only technologically, but spiritually? Did he just say that? And he's absolutely 100% correct. Praise Jesus. You have these backwards Christians, these backwards Muslims, not realizing that the ancient religions were morally upright and more advanced than anything we have today. And I think the evidence of that is in the Kemetic so-called religion, which is not a religion, it's a spiritual way of life. I mean, I don't know what to say. Let's just go on.
today is a spiritual pygmy. I mean, really, it's an infant in the realm of spirituality, and we have so much.
Wait a minute, did he just call our religions today infants or pygmies? Let's hear that again.
Today is a spiritual pygmy. I mean, really, it's an infant in the realm of spirit in material terms, but also in progress has been about us, about achieving us. But there may have been much greater things achieved in the past. And perhaps the achievement of human societies isn't only in material terms, but also in spiritual terms. And our society today is a spiritual pygmy. I mean, really, it's an infant in the realm of spirituality. And we have so much to learn from the ancients on this. I just think less modern arrogance, less overweening confidence in our own tech.
Do you know what he's talking about when he says modern arrogance? Do you know what he's talking about? Racism. Modern arrogance. That we have much more to learn from the ancients. He's just validating everything I've always said. He is validating everything, but he won't come out and say that the problem with the world has been Western, white, racist men. Not all white men, of course, because history history is documented with good men of all colors, including white, who have tried to bring about a revolution and set the planet straight. Hallelujah. Finally, someone's speaking the truth. Finally, someone publishing works that make sense. And you so-called ignorant buffoons, you black nationalists, come along with your stupid rhetoric. You're just as lost as the old oligarchy.
Technology and prosperity, a little more humility, a little more willingness to listen to the past rather than simply to project our own personalities onto it.
But obviously 20th century philosophers of science and anthropologists have been trying to make this kind of point. Why do you think debate is more liable to be shut down nowadays? Because you've come under attack, of course.
I have indeed, and I have no problem in coming under attack. I think that when one puts forward extraordinary ideas, they should be subjected to the fire of criticism, and it's only if they can survive that fire that they're worthwhile in some way. Look, we have a fantastic study called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. All scientists read it, and they know that knowledge in science doesn't progress by slow, gradual increments. It progresses by revolutions, where an old idea is overthrown and a new idea sweeps in and replaces it. Scientists know that this is how science works, and yet they doggedly and determinedly defend the existing model and attack anyone who attempts to propose an alternative model. And I can only say, perhaps this is human nature, that we become so invested in it.
Did you hear what he said? Did you hear the importance of what he just said? Let's hear it again.
All scientists read it, and they know that knowledge in science doesn't progress by slow, gradual increments. It progresses by revolutions, where an old idea is overthrown and a new idea sweeps in and replaces it. Scientists know that this is how science works, and yet they doggedly and determinedly defend the existing model and attack anyone who attempts to propose an alternative model.
So, do you understand what he's saying? He's saying that science, discoveries, the advancement, the old way of thinking is that you start primitive, you start basic, and you work your way to advance making discoveries. When it doesn't work that way, he's talking about the revolution where things are replaced. Now, I could go into the details about how civilizations evolve and become better, and that's because there's certain requirements. Number one, they have to be they can't be nomadic civilizations because a nomadic civilization doesn't have time to settle and to make improvements. And then he's right in terms of the revolution where things the old is replaced with the new, but there are certain requirements to that, meaning that the people that are populating a specific area or region of the planet, depending upon how they have adapted to that region, they're either left brain, right brain, or integrated brain thinkers, and that determines how their civilization will prosper or flourish. I've always talked about this many times, that Europeans who are left brain or polarizing left brain thinking developed out of the cold climate, and that made their skins, of course, white, nostrils thin, and that's where we get the majority of our ideology today, from left brain linear thinking, whereas the people of hue or melanin complexion developed in a warmer tropical environment, and they developed the right hemisphere of the brain, hence integrated brain thinking, and they were not nomadic, and they were able to build what we would say is advanced technology or advanced civilizations, which then were crushed and replaced with the Western civilization we see before you. All right, let's go more into what he's saying here.
And I can only say perhaps this is human nature, that we become so invested in a particular set of ideas that they become existentially connected to ourselves. And if the ideas are criticized, then we feel we're personally criticized, and it kicks in a huge territorial reaction. And that's what I see around the field of history. New evidence has come in.
Now, he's trying to tell us that these historians and these scholars are only defending their positions because they feel emotionally attached to it. And that's not true. These are conspirators. They are defending and out there because they know the truth and they don't want the truth to get out there. So they are the watchdogs. They are paid by the ruling elite to make sure that the planet is stuck in linear left brain thinking, but more importantly, will never get the truth of what the matrix is about. Let's go on.
Which means that the existing model of the origins of civilization cannot stand. And it's only a matter of time until that is recognized.
As you say, welcome attack, but presumably gets a bit more serious when you've sold millions of books, so people do know about your ideas. But when organizations shut down debate, as they did too, Rupert Sheldrake, the TED Talk people, they're run by a thing called the Sapling Foundation, they said the ideas, for instance, of Sheldrake, so far removed from mainstream scientific thinking that it's right to give health warnings when they eventually did put it up. What do you think of that?
Well, and oddly, TED have just done that with another talk that I did for one of their TEDx branches. They put a health warning on my talk. This latest talk is about the whole lost civilization issue. They put a health warning on it as though they believe that their audience consists of children who can't make up their own minds. This is what's fundamentally I find so repulsive about TED, which it ought to be a beautiful thing about the sharing of ideas, but actually it's about the control of ideas. And TED only wants to present a particular agenda.
You're so dumb. You are really dumb. For real. You're so dumb. You are really dumb.
TED, like the other institutions, wants to instill the narrative within the population on the planet. That's what TED wants to do. You guys, can you hit the like button, please, on the video to get the likes up? I would really, really appreciate it. You will find that Hollywood, universities, the social sciences, all of these institutions, TED Talks, want to go along with the status quo because they're in on the secret and they don't want you to uncover it.
With my previous talk, they solved the problem by just removing the talk from the internet. They were later forced to put it back up because the public reaction was so huge. With the latest talk, they've stuck this health warning over it. Come on, Ted, stop being so patronizing. Understand that your audiences are intelligent. They have discernment. They can make up their own minds. It's okay for them to hear a point of view that doesn't coincide with yours.
I think they may have said it was about drugs in your case and therefore regulatory.
You mean regarding the previous talk? No, again, that's not at all the issue. Yes, drugs were discussed in the previous talk, but Ted have had many talks where drugs are discussed. The problem was I was making a suggestion about the nature of consciousness that they didn't like. I was suggesting that consciousness maybe isn't just generated and manufactured by the brain. Maybe it isn't just an epiphenomenon of brain activity. Maybe it's much more complicated than that. Maybe the relationship of consciousness to the brain is more like the relationship of a TV signal to the TV set. It's called non-local consciousness. I was suggesting that consciousness may not be confined to the brain. Ted didn't like that. It goes against their fundamental materialist ideology where everything must be reduced to matter and there is no concept of spirit or transcendence.
So he's exactly right. So Ted, I'm shocked that they would remove a video. That's censorship. But what he's saying is what I've always talked about was the principle of non-locality of consciousness. So what he's getting into is that consciousness does not reside within the Geb portion, the physical body, but consciousness is everywhere. Hence, you're no one particular place or point in space and time. You are everywhere. You're a multidimensional being. So he took things further, saying that you could have an experience to where you could really feel how consciousness is everywhere and yet no one place by using medicines like DMT and ayahuasca, I believe. And I think that's probably what Ted didn't like was speaking about those medicines. And we know those medicines were practiced by the ancient Egyptians, the Mayans, all of those ancient cultures were actually involved in using those medicines to access different realms and to speak directly to different interdimensional beings. And we know those beings exist. They are not dream phenomena, they are actual entities. Let us go on.
Okay, but what do you think if this kind of shutting down of debate is affecting other disciplines, not just archaeology or psychology, I suppose?
I feel sure it is affecting other disciplines. In the discipline that I know about, I see that discipline massively affected by what is in fact a form of censorship. And I know that's happening because I know the subject and I know the people involved. In other subjects where I don't know the subject and I don't know the people, it seems to me that the same thing is happening, that false information is being presented as the truth.
You get any intimations of that when it comes to, say, geopolitics?
Yes, I do. I feel that these days I find it difficult to listen to television. I find it difficult to listen to 24-hour rolling misery, which is what the rolling news is, to convince us that the world is just filled with hatred and fear and suspicion. What we need to do is to emphasize the human capacity for love, for courage, for strength, for decency, for goodness. We need to hear about that every day.
Now, key in on what he's saying, because this is what I've been talking about a lot. Do you guys in the chat room hear me? It's fear-based teachings. Fear-based teachings. We know that modern media derive their ratings off putting forth stories that are based on fear. You have to fear flying, you have to fear traveling, you have to fear medications, you have to fear foods, because they know that pumps their ratings up. So what you have is your internet so-called spiritualists who come on, and all they want to talk about is the conspiracy, the ruling elite, the Illuminati. That's all they talk about. They don't talk about how you can ascend, how you can take back the throne, how you can become the divine being you were meant to be. They don't want to get into that because they don't know how to do it. They're not trained to do that. So they get the support from making you afraid. So every time you tune into their channel, it's always another conspiracy theory that they're postulating, they're putting forth to get your viewership.
Because there's many more examples of that than there is of the stuff that the media welter in at the moment.
Do you think, ironically, one of the pressures is dialectical materialism? You've written previously about the international aid business.
Yes. I've always been a bit of an outsider, taking a rather radical point of
Just
view.
take us back to that.
Well, back in the 80s, I published a book called Lords of Poverty: The Freewheeling Lifestyles, Power, Prestige, and Corruption of the Multi-Billion-Dollar Aid Business. I happen to think aid is a really bad thing. I don't think it does any good. I think it keeps the world locked in an impossible situation. It's a band-aid to a problem that needs to be solved a totally different way. It allows the rich countries to feel generous and altruistic. But they're not being generous and altruistic at all. They're just controlling the world. It's a mechanism of control. I felt that very strongly in the 80s. I'd spent the whole of the 80s traveling around, seeing development projects, and I told it like it was.
Any growing optimism about that? Growing acceptance
I think
of those ideas?
I think,
Although Britain, of course, says it must keep its aid budget up at this percentage.
I think the whole concept of aid is faulty. I think it's patronizing. It implies that we know and they don't know. I think the concept of helping one another as human beings, that's a different matter. But when we create these large bureaucracies, fund them with massive amounts of public money and give them huge power to create giant dams and roads in countries that perhaps need some other form of development, then we're doing a bad thing.
So how do you think we can reform?
So you know that the when you give money for aid to foreign countries, and it's really it's colonialism that's going on. So they send in their missionaries, and what they do is they spread diseases to these third world countries so they can decrease the population. They create construction projects which seem like they're creating work for the indigenous population, when really they're putting the country in debt. So the country can never get out of poverty. So the country can never advance. It's a whole scheme that they got going. This is because you have to understand, war and sending troops in to conquer third world countries. War, that is not the only. I'm sorry, sending the troops in is not the only way to wage war on a third world country. You can destabilize its economy, and that's a way of conducting war. All right, so there's many paths to doing this, and you'll see that the United States does this all the time. Therefore, next time you see a program where you're seeing that we're giving international aid to a country, you need to look at it with a critical eye, because more likely than not, it's not aid that we're giving them. It's a means for us to go in and to rape that country of its national resources, to put the country in debt, to rob their central bank, to put in place a puppet dictator or a puppet leader. This is what we do as a country. But anyway, let's hear his final thoughts.
Academia, for instance, so that we can have the sort of debate you want to have.
I think it's in process now. I think we're in the middle of a huge paradigm shift for humanity. We are living at the time when human beings finally are waking up all around the world. It's slow. It's not a huge flame yet, but it's growing, and it's brighter every day. And a time will come when these debates, these discussions, the mind control of the past, the stupidity, the locking into ideology, all of that will be regarded as a folly of our infancy.
Graham Hancock, thank you.
So there you have it. And I have been, like I said, as I've been saying many, many times, is that that we are in a stupor state. We don't realize what's going on. Now, I talked about threefold in terms of what's going on. The third level is that we have to understand that the matrix is responding to our thoughts and beliefs. So we actually are creating the reality that we exist in, that this reality is not an objective reality. And that if you're looking for something that is objective, that is solid, that is static, you're not going to find it. It's going to change. The more you look, the more you'll find, depending upon your belief system. So I want you to all walk away and think about this message, what we have heard here this evening, because this is important for us to understand that we are living in a laboratory. We're all part of an experiment. We're all been lied to. It's in the nature of who we are and the nature of reality and our history. And that it will come to light eventually, but we're going to have to ask questions and not accept the status quo. We're going to have to go deeper, and that we're going to have to get rid of affiliations with one particular perspective or way of thinking. And what I mean by that is stop going along and thinking, oh, well, I'm this or I'm that. I'm a Comedian. I'm a Hebrew Israelite. I'm this. You're not. You're consciousness. You're divine being. You're God man. You're God woman. That's who you are. You have no religious affiliation. You have no political affiliation. All of that is just erroneous names and definitions to keep us separated and keep us apart. And I think a question was asked in the chat room, if I'm correct, about when did we become conscious or when did consciousness begin. You have to understand that we're infinite beings. We have no beginning, no end. So I want to thank you all for coming into the chat room. And if you guys get a chance, please donate to the channel so we can have some more videos like this. This is Kassank Ma Keperu, son of Ma'at and Tudi. Ma'at is the beautiful goddess Heteru. Until my next video, Amun Ra.